China sees another wave of random killings. On November 11th, a car attack in Zhuhai, Guangdong province caused 35 deaths and 43 injuries. Days later, on November 16th, a student surnamed Xu at the Wuxi Institute of Arts and Technology in Jiangsu allegedly carried out a brutal stabbing spree. The attack, reported fueled by frustrations over failing to receive a diploma and the dissatisfaction with internship pay, left 8 dead and 17 injured. Xu was arrested at the scene. The campus was strewn with blood, with some victims collapsing as they bled profusely. Blood stains stretched over 10 meters on the ground. Despite the severity of the incident, it took CCTV 5 hours to report the news, and online discussions were quickly censored. Netizens expressed outrage over the escalating violence, warning that China is on the path to hell. 2 indiscriminate incidents within a week have left netizens alarmed, with the shocking news reverberating nationwide. Recent cases are part of a troubling trend. In September, a Japanese elementary school student was fatally stabbed in Shenzhen. On July 4th, a 64-year-old man in Shenyang attacked passers-by in a residential area, killing 3 and injured 1. On June 24th, a Chinese man stabbed a Japanese mother and a child near a school bus. On June 19th, a 54-year-old man launched a knife attack at Shanghai's Hechuan Road metro station, injuring 3. On June 10th, 4 American teachers were stabbed in a park in Jilin City. On May 20th, a 45-year-old woman entered a Mingde Elementary School in Guixi City, Jiangxi Province, killing 2 and injured 10. That same month, a random stabbing at a hospital in Zhenxiong County, Yunnan, left 2 dead and 21 injured. The frequency of these violent attacks has sparked widespread fear and concerns over public safety. The car attack in Zhuhai, which left 35 dead, stands out as the most severe. However, this is far from the first incident of its kind in Zhuhai this year. Similar events have become alarmingly frequent, no longer isolated occurrence. Contrary to CCTV's description of these as rare events, they are now disturbingly commonplace. Notably, none of these cases are routine public security incidents, personal vendettas, or traffic accidents. Each reflects a deliberate intent to retaliate against society through indiscriminate killings. By definition, these acts are acts of terror. Hi, I'm Dongshan. Welcome to Dig Into China, where we delve deep into China to uncover unique insights. In this episode, we'll explore why I believe violent incidents in China are set to increase and why what we are witnessing now is merely the beginning of an era of growing chaos. Many people explain the frequent violent incidents in China by pointing to the country's economic downturn, which certainly plays a direct role. In most of the cases mentioned, the perpetrators were struggling with financial or personal challenges. For example, the attacker in Shanghai Songjiang district sold his phone to pay off debts before carrying out the killing. In the Qingdao cement mixer truck incident, the driver screamed, "The Communist Party won't let me live," as he ran people over. In the Zhuhai car attack, the assailant reportedly turned to violence after a divorce left him with nothing. Likewise, the Wuxi attacker revealed in his confession that he was under immense pressure from both his job and his studies. However, I believe that while economic hardships may be the spark for the current surge in violent incidents in China, they are not the fundamental cause. Economic downturns are not unique to China. For example, Japan faced a major economic recession in the past, which led to the rise of the Omo-Shinryo cult. But such incidents were far less frequent than in China. Additionally, countries that are much poorer than China, like North Korea and Vietnam, do not experience violent events on the same scale. Though China is currently in economic decline, its situation is still far better than it was in 2010, a time when large-scale violent incidents were not as common. If we look at the lives of these perpetrators, it's clear they are struggling, but can their hardships really compare to those of the 1990s or the era in which they were born? Many of these attackers are older and came from a time of much greater poverty. Even though life may be tough for them now, it is certainly better than what they experienced back then. I believe the large-scale violent incidents in China today are primarily the result of economic decline, which has triggered a collapse in the ideological framework of the Chinese people. China has entered a state of ideological void, and in this condition, society as a whole has become increasingly chaotic. This, I believe, is the fundamental cause. Let's take a step back and examine the ideological landscape throughout China's history. Since the founding of the People's Republic, China has gone through two distinct ideological phases. The first was during the early years of Mao Zedong's rule, when the dominant ideology was communism, intertwined with the personal cult of Mao himself. During this time, the Chinese people's mental state was relatively stable, not greatly affected by economic hardship. Life was poor, but the idea of a communist utopia offered a sense of purpose and a direction. In a way, this ideological foundation was akin to religious belief, whether in Allah or Jesus Christ. This isn't to say that Mao's era was free of violent events. The violence that did occur, especially during the Cultural Revolution, was largely driven by ideological persecution, which closely mirrors the nature of religious persecution. However, after Mao Zedong's death, China quickly entered its second phase, the era of Deng Xiaoping, during which the ideology centered around the black cat or white cat theory began to replace the earlier communist principles. In Deng's words, it doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white as long as it catches mice. In this new ideology, the focus shifted away from concepts like socialism and communism, and economic development became the top priority. The most important goal was to live a better life, with the economy improving each day. With the reform and opening up policies, along with China's accession to the WTO, this black cat, white cat ideology became an established reality in China. As a result, the income of Chinese people steadily increased, and for a long time, it became widely accepted that their income would continue to rise and their lives would continually improve. This belief in progress became the guiding principle for the people. However, there is a crucial problem with Deng Xiaoping's philosophy. It relies on the assumption that economic growth will continue. When the economy stops growing or begins to decline, this ideology begins to break down. For many people, their belief in a better future starts to collapse. The individuals responsible for the violent incidents mentioned earlier are clearly part of this group whose faith had shattered. Over the years, their income has been severely affected, their wealth has diminished, and their lives have been deeply hurt by economic hardship. Their once hopeful outlook was given away to a sense of hopelessness. The belief that life will improve year by year has completely disappeared, leaving them without any expectation of a brighter future. When this belief system collapses, some individuals may turn to democratic ideals, believing that democracy is the key to save China. However, most people lack the ability to access such alternative viewpoints. Due to China's stringent censorship, they find themselves in a state of ideological confusion or uncertainty. There is no longer widespread faith in the lofty ideals of communism. Few people practice religion, and even fewer follow beliefs in Jesus Christ. Concepts like the afterlife or the notion that indiscriminate killing leads to hell are largely dismissed. For many Chinese, death is simply the end, and only the present moment holds any real significance. These individuals can be seen as having lost all sense of belief. With the collapse of their ideological framework, these individuals lose any sense of control over their thoughts. When faced with life's hardship, the combination of ideological confusion and external struggle can easily lead to the belief, if I can't live a good life, then why not kill someone in exchange, even if it's just one person or more? It's worth it. This kind of conflict, where the disconnect between ideology and the reality sparks chaos, is not a new phenomenon. Back in 1978, when China first started its economic reforms, people's ideological beliefs were already shifting. Yet, the economy hadn't yet seen rapid growth. During this period, the clash between ideology and reality created significant social unrest, which ultimately led to the 1983 Strike Hard campaign, a violent crackdown on perceived threats to stability. Following the economic downturn, the Chinese Communist Party's long-established narrative has started to break down, particularly among lower-income groups. To prevent the further instability, China requires a new ideological framework to replace the outdated Deng Xiaoping ideology, one that can provide a sense of unity and serve as a new guiding belief for society. However, Xi Jinping has clearly failed to establish such an ideology. When a society lacks a coherent and a compelling belief system, combined with economic decline, social chaos is inevitable. There is a political concept known as Sudanization, which describes a variant of traditional authoritarianism. In a fully totalitarian regime like North Korea, the government controls both the apparatus of violence and the ideological narrative. But when a government only controls violence without a unifying ideology, it falls into Sudanization. Countries that have experienced Sudanization have never maintained a stable public order. The breakdown of law and order is a natural consequence in such systems. Following this reasoning, it's clear that China's public security will only continue to worsen. Chinese people are exposed to Marxist ideology from a young age. Although many may not believe in communism or think it will never come to fruition, certain ideas such as atheism from communist teachings still influence individuals. When a society lacks a cohesive ideology and a significant portion of its people are living in extreme hardship, the result can be catastrophic. In such conditions, individuals are more likely to turn into perpetrators of violent and tragic events. Why do I believe such violent incidents will continue to increase in the future? The primary reason is that the underlying issues driving these events are the ones that the Chinese Communist Party cannot address, and these problems are likely to escalate in the coming years. The first trigger for these violent incidents is the issue of economic decline, which is something the Communist Party cannot solve. If they were able to address it, they would have done so by now. No matter how you look at it, China's economy is only going to worsen in the future. Secondly, Xi Jinping seems unlikely to establish a new ideological framework. He hasn't even shown signs of attempting one. Observing Chinese online discussions, supporters of the Communist Party still rely on Deng Xiaoping's ideology. Their praise centers on the narrative that the Communist Party led us to economic prosperity. At the same time, they divert attention by criticizing the US, emphasizing its flaws and claiming its citizens live in hardship. One reason is that this generation was raised under Deng Xiaoping's ideological framework. Another is that Xi Jinping continues to reinforce this logic. His so-called Chinese dream doesn't break away from Deng's ideas, but rather builds upon them by incorporating new elements such as chauvinism and heightened nationalism. She has added narratives like Chinese people are the strongest, China is the best, the world is suppressing us, and Western countries are China's enemies. Xi Jinping seems unaware that this ideological framework relies on sustained economic growth. He has made no preparations for how to address its collapse should the economy falter. The rise in violent incidents is merely the beginning, as China has yet to witness a full-scale ideological collapse. Currently, this collapse has only affected a small portion of the population, yet the damage it has caused is already substantial. The Communist Party continues to propagate the claims online, asserting that the US is on the brink of collapse while China's economy remains robust. For those who haven't entered the workforce or who feel limited effects from the economic downturn, this narrative still retains some influence. However, looking ahead, if China's GDP stagnates or fails behind the US, the number of people experiencing ideological collapse will surge dramatically. Without a new ideology to take its place, violent incidents are bound to multiply. These incidents will in turn erode the narrative that China is strong and steadily improving, exposing the reality of its struggles. This shattered ideology will create a vicious cycle, where disillusionment further amplifies the likelihood of more violent events. Beyond the broader issues, let's examine the perpetrators themselves. The Communist Party seems entirely powerless to control them. While in the US, violent incidents are often blamed on guns, in China it seems that the presence of firearms is irrelevant. Anything can become a tool for violence. Recently, attackers have mainly used knives and cars. How do we regulate these? Knives can be controlled to some extent, like in regions such as Xinjiang, where they are locked up and purchased through real name registration. But what about cars? It's not feasible to impose similar restrictions. Are we really going to require police approval to buy or use a car? If that happens, what happens to economic development? The most ridiculous recent development is the news that the Zhuhai city government is planning to investigate the so-called 8 loser individuals, those who have suffered in areas like a failed investment, job loss, life setbacks, emotional struggles, broken relationships, mental imbalances, mental health issues, and a poor upbringing. This idea is simply absurd. If these individuals were confronted by officials lecturing them, it would likely only intensify their anger and resentment. Those already feeling desperate and unafraid are more likely to act out in retaliation. In the face of people who are unafraid of anything, the surveillance systems that the Chinese Communist Party has relied on for control are now powerless. The government has no real means to manage them. Additionally, with the country's financial strain, it remains unclear whether there will be sufficient resources to fund the management of these individuals going forward. Given these conditions, it's inevitable that violent incidents in China will increase and the trend toward Sudanization will intensify. China's situation has escalated into a new phase. In recent years, the frequency of violent incidents has increased from occasional occurrence to several each month. These incidents are no longer confined to within China's borders, but have also spread overseas. Additionally, the scope of the attacks has expanded, now targeting foreigners as well, with the death toll rising significantly from a handful of victims to as many as 35. The next stage of escalation remains unclear, but it is highly probable that the frequency of such incidents will increase. The targets may expand to include government institutions both at home and abroad, as well as government officials, with the death toll likely continue to rise. China has changed significantly from just a few years ago, with growing anger and frustration among its people. Recently, the concept of atomized rebellion has surfaced, referring to these random acts of violence. It suggests that these individuals are isolated rebels, driven to violence as a result of their disillusionment with society. In a situation where the government controls powerful weapons, ordinary citizens have no way to fight back directly. As a result, some turn to indiscriminate attacks as a form of resistance against the government and the broader social system. This kind of rebellion is seen as an inevitable outcome of the oppressive rule of an authoritarian regime, potentially leading to widespread disorder and ultimately the collapse of the Communist Party's control. I believe, however, that this perspective is flawed. Atomized rebellion will only lead to chaos, not the downfall of an authoritarian regime. It cannot inspire widespread resistance to the government, especially since most of the victims are ordinary people. This kind of violence only results in greater suffering for society without triggering meaningful change. The only true way to steer China out of chaos is by introducing a viable, coherent ideology that fills the current ideological gap. Such an ideology would give those facing economic struggles and hardships a sense of direction and hope, offering them a path forward. This is the only way forward. The only ideology capable of truly lifting China out of its turmoil is democracy. When society recognizes that democracy is the path to the future and views the pursuit of democratic reforms as the hope for a better life, China can begin to move past its current chaos. If democratic values were to spread with people understanding that their hardships stem from the authoritarian rule of the Communist Party, then when faced with injustice, their anger would transform into a desire for democracy. Rather than lashing out at society, they would seek to change it. The violence directed at innocent people would shift into a resolve to oppose the regime. Public dissatisfaction would no longer result in random acts of violence, but would evolve into the collective will to drive the nation forward. This shift will undoubtedly be challenging, especially with the Communist Party's firewall in place, making it nearly impossible to accomplish. At present, very few people in China recognize the importance of democracy, and as a result, there is no democratic ideology in the country. However, this remains the only viable solution. We must not get discouraged, no matter how difficult the journey may be. The focus should be on spreading democratic values and hoping they can serve as a new ideology to fill the void in China during this period of ideological uncertainty. This is a task that we must all embrace. Thank you so much for watching. If you find this video helpful, please like it, drop a comment below, and hit the subscribe button right here. It really helps YouTube suggest my video to others. I'll be back with more content soon. Until then, be well.